In 2013, the Los Angeles police released a short piece of security camera footage. They were hoping someone, anyone, would recognize the young woman in it and help them find her. Instead, that video became one of the most watched, most analyzed, most unsettling clips the internet has ever produced. It shows a young woman, alone, in a hotel elevator. She presses every button. She steps out and looks around a corner as if she's hiding from someone or watching for someone. She steps back in. She makes strange movements with her hands, almost as if she's talking to a person who isn't there. And the elevator doors, for the length of the video, simply never close. Her name was Elisa Lam. She was 21 years old. And about 3 weeks after that footage was taken, she was found dead in just about the last place on Earth anyone thought to look. For years, this case has been treated as a ghost story, a puzzle, a piece of dark internet folklore. And in the noise of all those theories, the truth and the young woman at the center of it got buried. So tonight, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to tell you what actually happened to Elisa Lam, carefully and honestly, because the real story is sadder and more human than any of the legends built on top of it. Let me tell you who she was first. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada. By the accounts of those who knew her, she was bright, funny, deeply thoughtful. She kept a blog where she wrote with real honesty about her life, her travels, and her inner world. And part of that inner world was a struggle she lived with openly. Elisa had bipolar disorder. She had been managing a serious mental health condition with medication for some time. I want to say that plainly and early and without any of the spooky framing this case usually gets, because it is the single most important fact in understanding what happened to her. This was not a ghost story. This was a young woman living with a real illness, far from home, doing her best. In January of 2013, Elisa set out on a solo trip down the west coast of the United States. A young person traveling alone, seeing the world. She made her way to Los Angeles, and there she checked into a place with a long and genuinely dark reputation. A hotel in the heart of downtown called the Cecil. She was supposed to check out and continue her trip at the end of the month. She never did. The Cecil Hotel deserves a moment of its own because it is part of why this case took on the shape it did. The Cecil opened in the 1920s as a grand downtown hotel, but over the decades, as the neighborhood around it fell on hard times, the Cecil became something else. A place with a genuinely grim history. Over the years, it had been associated with a long list of tragedies, deaths, suicides, and infamously, it had reportedly housed at least one notorious serial killer during his crimes. It was the kind of building that already had a reputation for darkness long before Elisa Lam ever walked through its doors. So when something terrible happened there, the setting did half the work for the legend that followed. Elisa checked in and was initially placed in a shared hostel-style room, but within a few days there were complaints. Her roommates reported odd behavior, and the staff moved her to a private room. In on its own, that's a small detail, but in light of everything we now understand about her condition, it may have been an early sign that Elisa was beginning to struggle, that the illness she lived with was, in those days at the Cecil, starting to take hold. And then, at the end of January, the daily phone calls she made home to her family simply stopped. When the calls stopped, Elisa's family knew that something was wrong. She was close with them. She checked in regularly. Silence was not like her. They contacted the authorities, and the Los Angeles police opened a missing persons investigation. They searched the hotel, they worked the case, and after some time without a breakthrough, they did what police do when they're out of leads and a life may be on the line. They turned to the public. They pulled the security footage from the hotel's elevator, footage from around the time Elisa was last seen, and they released it to the media, hoping that someone out there would recognize her, would remember seeing her, would offer the one tip that might bring her home. It was a standard move, a search tool, a way to put a missing young woman's face in front of as many eyes as possible. They could not have predicted what that piece of footage would become, because the video did not just help people recognize Elisa, it captivated them, it disturbed them, and almost overnight, a police search tool became a viral phenomenon, and the story stopped being about finding a missing girl and started being about decoding a mystery. To understand why, you have to understand what's actually in those 4 minutes. The footage is, on its surface, simple. A young woman in an elevator. But it is the way she behaves that has held people for over a decade. Elisa steps into the elevator and presses several buttons, all of them by some accounts. She steps to the doorway and leans out, looking down the hallway, peering around the edge in a way that reads as either hiding or searching. She pulls back. Then she steps out of the elevator entirely, then back in. She stands against the wall. At one point, she makes a series of unusual movements with her hands and arms, gestures that look to many viewers like she's having a conversation, or counting, or trying to communicate with someone just out of frame. And the whole time, the elevator doors stay open. They never close, and the car never moves for the duration of the clip. To a frightened public, primed by the hotel's dark reputation, this looked like evidence of something terrible. Was she hiding from a pursuer? Was someone standing in the hallway just off camera? Was she possessed, haunted, drugged, attacked? The theories wrote themselves. But there is another way to read that footage, one that is far less mysterious and far more heartbreaking. The behavior in that video, the agitation, the gestures, the apparent responses to things that aren't there, is, to many mental health professionals who have watched it, consistent with a person in the grip of a severe psychiatric episode. A young woman, alone, unwell, and frightened by something inside her own mind. Hold on to both readings, because the gap between them is the entire story. When that video hit the internet, it did not stay a missing persons appeal for long. It became an obsession. Amateur investigators, true crime fans, paranormal believers, and millions of ordinary curious people descended on the footage. They slowed it down, they analyzed every frame, they connected it to the hotel's dark history, to ghost stories, to an online horror game, to elaborate theories of murder and cover-up. The case of Elisa Lam became one of the first truly viral internet mysteries, a thing the whole world was trying to solve at once. And here is where I have to stop and say something serious, because that wave of amateur sleuthing did real harm. In their hunt for a culprit, online detectives fixated on a musician who had once stayed at the Cecil Hotel and posted videos online. They decided, with no evidence, that he was involved. They harassed him relentlessly. They flooded his accounts, accused him of murder, and made his life a nightmare. For a crime that had not even been established to be a crime against a man who was completely, demonstrably innocent. He had not even been in the country when Elisa died. It nearly destroyed him. Quick, important word before we continue. If these cases matter to you, please subscribe. This channel is built on telling them with care, and there's a new one every week. Now, let me tell you how Elisa Lam was found, because it is the detail that turned this from a missing persons case into a legend. For about 2 weeks after the video was released, there was nothing. No confirmed sightings. No Elisa. The search went cold. And then, the guests of the Cecil Hotel began to complain about the water. The water pressure in the hotel had dropped, and when it did come out of the taps, residents reported that it looked wrong, discolored, and tasted strange. People had been drinking it, bathing in it, brushing their teeth with it for days. A maintenance worker was sent up to the roof to check the hotel's water supply. Up on top of the building stood several large metal water tanks, the cisterns that fed the hotel. He climbed up to inspect them. He opened one of the heavy lids, and inside he found Elisa Lam. She had been in that water tank on the roof of the hotel the entire time the world had been searching for her. While theories spun across the internet, while her face was on every screen, she was up there, in the dark, in the water. Found only because the building's plumbing finally gave her away. It is, I think, one of the most quietly devastating discoveries in any of these cases. Not because of horror, but because of how long she was there, so close while everyone looked everywhere else. So how did she end up there? And what did the investigation actually conclude? The autopsy and the official investigation reached a clear finding. Elisa Lam's death was ruled an accident. The cause was drowning. And critically, the medical examiner listed her bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. There were no signs of foul play, no evidence of assault, no indication that anyone else was involved in her death. Investigators also found that the medications she relied on to manage her condition appeared to be at low levels in her system, suggesting she may not have been taking them consistently in those final days, which, for someone with her illness, can be the beginning of a serious crisis. Put together, the picture that emerges is not a ghost story or a murder. It is a tragedy. A young woman, alone in an unfamiliar city, slipping into a severe psychiatric episode, frightened and disoriented, who somehow made her way up onto that roof to those tanks and ended up in the water. The strange behavior in the elevator wasn't a clue to a killer. It was a window into a mind in crisis. Now, the questions people always raise: how did she get to the roof past an alarmed door? How did she get into the tank? And how was the lid found closed? These are fair questions, and they're the reason some people still resist the official answer. So let me address them honestly, because I think you deserve that. The roof access has rational explanations. There were ways up to that roof, a fire escape, doors that, in a building like the Cecil, were not always as secured as they should have been. Hotel staff and others did have access. A determined person in a manic state with the strange, sometimes superhuman energy such episodes can bring could plausibly have made it up there. The tank itself and the lid are harder, and I won't pretend otherwise. There has been genuine debate about whether the lid was open or closed when she was found, and how someone could enter one of those tanks and end up the way she did. This is the single hardest knot in the case, and it's the one the believers in something darker hold on to, and I understand why. But here is the honest weight of the evidence. A full investigation, a thorough autopsy, and years of expert scrutiny, including a widely seen documentary that re-examined everything, all arrived at the same place. This was an accidental death driven by a mental health crisis. No suspect, no murder, no evidence of anyone else. Sometimes the truth has a loose thread or two that never quite gets tucked in. That doesn't mean there's a monster behind it. Often, it just means reality is messier than a clean story. And the cleanest, most comforting story, that a villain did this, is almost certainly not the true one. I want to step back now and talk about what this case really is, because I think it's a mirror. Elisa Lam was a real, beloved 21-year-old woman. She had a family who adored her, who knew her voice on the phone every day, who reported her missing the moment that voice went quiet. She was a writer. She was funny. She was brave enough to travel the world alone while managing an illness that takes enormous strength to live with. She deserved to come home, get well, and grow old. Instead, her final, frightened moments were caught on a security camera and then turned into entertainment for the entire planet. Her death became a meme, a horror story, a puzzle to be solved by strangers. An innocent man was hounded for it, and the actual human being, a sick, scared young woman who needed help and didn't get it in time, very nearly vanished underneath all of it. That, to me, is the real haunting of the Cecil Hotel. Not a ghost, not a curse. The way we took a mental health tragedy and made a spectacle of it. The way the search for a missing girl became a game, and the girl herself became almost incidental to it. So, if you take one thing from Elisa Lam's story, let it be this. Behind every one of these cases is a person, and some of them weren't taken by a killer at all. They were taken by an illness and a moment and a world that watched and looked everywhere except at the simple, sad truth. So I'll leave it with you, the way I always do, but a little more gently this time. Elisa Lam's case was officially closed, an accidental death tied to a mental health crisis she fought hard against. And yet, more than a decade later, people still argue about that elevator video, still feel that it can't be that simple, still want there to be more to it. I understand the pull of that, but I'd ask you to sit with the harder, quieter truth, and to be kind to the young woman at the center of it. What do you think when you watch that footage? Do you see a mystery, or do you see someone who needed help? Tell me in the comments. And please, on this one, keep it human. And if anything in Elisa's story hit a little close to home, if you or someone you love is struggling, please reach out to someone. It's a sign of strength, not weakness. No one should have to face that alone. I'm Gravenfield. The cases that were closed, but never quite let go of us. Subscribe. Take care of yourselves out there, and look out for each other.